start off. It's 4 o'clock. My next session here will be about modern public folders and how we migrate to these modern public folders from our legacy public folders. Anyone already running modern public folders today? One. Anyone fighting with their legacy public folders and want to move them to the modern public folders? In a few. Okay. That's what we will be covering today then. Not all of you might have seen my last session, so a brief introduction of me. My name is Peter Schmidt. I'm an infrastructure architect at EG, Danish company. I'm located in one of our Danish branch offices in the Microsoft infrastructure department. I work with Exchange, Office 365, and a bit of Link. I'm a certified master on Exchange, and I'm an MVP on Exchange as well. I'm quite active in the Microsoft communities, both with my blog, Twitter, and a lot in the Danish communities with Unified Communications User Group, Danish online forum, and speaking at several Danish Microsoft events. The agenda for my session today is the architecture of modern public folders and how we deploy these new modern public folders, either if it's on-prem, Exchange 2013, or how we access them in Exchange Online, if that's the way we want to go. And then the migration part. How do we get our content moved to those new modern public folders? I have a bit of demo demonstrating a migration of some folders, and I'll end up with a brief summary of what I'm going through today. If we start off with the architecture of modern public folders. With Exchange 2013, Microsoft did a change in the architecture of the way we see public folders. They did that for a number of reasons. One of them was that we couldn't have legacy public folders in the cloud in Office 365. So that was probably one of the main goals, to make sure that we could actually host public folders in Exchange Online. But there were also a few other great benefits of this new architecture. One of them is that we get a whole new scope of high availability nowadays with our modern public folders. Since the shift has been now that we go from public folder databases, and now with modern public folders we have public folder mailboxes. That way we can handle the public folder mailboxes the same way we handle mailboxes in Exchange today. So we can have the public folder mailboxes, one or multiple of them, in our normal mailbox databases and handle them even in the database availability group. So that gives us the same high availability features in Exchange for our public folders as we know it from our mailboxes. Microsoft has changed the way public folders replicate with Exchange 2013 and our modern public folders. Before we had a multi-master replication. So it was our public folders that determined the replicated state of the public folder content. That has been changed. So now we have one single master. I'll get further into that later. From the user perspective, nothing has changed when they need to access our new modern public folders. So for the users, this change in architecture is completely transparent to them. So to demonstrate, when we create modern public folders, in this example we have 3 modern public folder mailboxes. And as stated earlier, instead of having multi-master replication, we have a single master. This means that we have one master in our public folders that manage the public folder hierarchy. And this is the one that's illustrated with the green one here. The public folder hierarchy will be distributed to all the other public folder mailboxes we have, but it will only be read and writable on in one of our public folder mailboxes. If we take a look at how that actually works for the users, we have our public folder mailboxes here. The main one is the one in the Exchange terms called the primary public folder mailbox. This is the one holding the writable copy of our public folder hierarchy. All the other ones are actually just called secondary public folder mailboxes. So when a user connects to one of the public folder mailboxes we have, and they create some new content, that new content could be a folder here, folder 2, that will automatically be proxied back to our primary public folder mailbox containing our main repository for the public folder hierarchy. Within 15 minutes, that hierarchy will be updated on all public folder mailboxes that users are connected to. We can have public folder mailboxes which users are not connected to, but they'll get an update within an hour. So basically, what's new with the modern public folder? We have support based on scripts that I'll dive into later. So we can migrate our legacy public folders from Exchange 2007 or Exchange 2010. We have support for cross-premise access to our public folders. And that could be cross-forest as well. There are also support nowadays for hybrid scenarios where you might move or have some users in Exchange Online and keep your modern public folders on-premise. That scenario is also supported. For users who put their public folders in Office 365, they'll get automated storage management, which is sort of Microsoft's automated mechanisms that make sure that the quotas available in public folder mailboxes the whole process around managing those is automated. I'll get further into that later. The UI has changed for our public folders. It's the same UI we have in Exchange 2013, and it's the same UI we have when we access our Exchange Online. But it's different from how we know it from previous legacy public folders. The text and full text search engine has changed, and you probably already know that it also changed with Exchange 2013 based on the Microsoft acquisition of the fast search engine. So it's the same search engine that is now used for the content we have in our public folders. And then the whole backup restore mechanism has changed, because now our public folder mailboxes is handled the same way we handle mailboxes in scenarios where we have to back up or even restore. And we have access from our Outlook web app to our public folders. A brief look at the supported versions which can access our modern public folders. If we start off with the clients, clients back to Outlook 2007 can access modern public folders. But on the web-based client, you need the OWA client from Exchange 2013. So in that case, the user mailboxes has to have been moved to an Exchange 2013 platform. The Exchange server. Well, Exchange 2013 users can access our legacy public folders. But the other way around does not work. So if you still have mailboxes located in some Exchange 2007, 2010, they cannot access our public folder when we move them to modern public folders. And what's important to note about when we start the migration of the public folders, it's a cutover process. So you have to plan for this. You cannot have a long process where you do a lot of delta replication, where you access public folders in both sides. That's not possible. It's a cutover migration. So depending on the amount of data you have in your public folders, it's something you need to plan for. This is mostly for reference uses since the slides is available afterwards, but a few of the items I'll cover right now. Some of them I've already gone through. But as you know, we've changed from having public folder databases, so now we are having public folder mailboxes. But the way the content in the public folders communicate has also changed. Before it was based on email, communicating between our public folders, synchronizing. It's now direct mailbox sync. It's the same way as when Outlook connects to a mailbox. The search mechanism has changed, so now we can also index attachments in mails that we have located in our public folder mailboxes. The access control to managing our public folders has changed, since we are now relying on the RBAC model that was introduced with Exchange 2013. Besides that, on the user side, client side, the ACLs is still the way we handle the user access to public folders. The admin platform, as mentioned earlier, is based on the new admin platform with the admin control center. We can also access them through PowerShell. I think I covered the rest of the bullets. So when we start thinking of deploying public folders, basically it's pretty easy. It's the same way as when we need to create a mailbox. It's just a mailbox with a parameter. And this is the way we do it in Exchange 2013 or in Exchange Online. But in this scenario, it's just, I'm not at the point where we have legacy public folders. This is just how we get started in a new environment with public folder. I'll get back to when we have legacy public folders in place as well. But that's basically the command and the mailbox you need to do for users to be able to use modern public folders. Thereby the users can access them, create folders, messages, whatever they need. You can create more public folder mailboxes, and that's depending on the amount of data you have in your public folders. Because the recommended size of public folder mailboxes is 50 gigabyte. There's a number of reasons for that. One of them is also the backup restore issue. If they get above that, you can use some scripts to actually split your public folder mailbox into 2 public folder mailboxes. And as mentioned before, you can have as many public folder mailboxes as you like, depending on the amount of data you have. In Exchange Online, public folders or public folder mailboxes actually come as no cost. You don't need a license for a public folder mailbox. And the limit in Exchange Online is 50 public folder mailboxes, and the storage, maximum storage available in Exchange Online is actually 2.5 terabyte of public folder data. And again, Microsoft is limiting based on the way they manage stuff in Exchange Online. They are handling all the auto-splitting of the public folders. So depending on the amount of connections that we have on Exchange, or depending on the amount of data we have in a single public folder mailbox, that public folder mailbox will automatically be split. And the way they do that is they take half of the content of your public folder mailboxes and split the content into 2. When you look at the backup and restore of public folders, previously it's probably not been the best way of doing disaster recovery scenarios when you have a lot of public folder data. It's definitely become more easy now, because we handle it the same way as we handle mailbox restores. So we can recover single items in a public folder mailbox, the same way as we do in Exchange. We can look them up in the dumpster within the retention period. But in case we need to go back to a backup and do a restore, we can do it the same way as we do with mailboxes. Put them into a recovery database and merge the content back into our public folder mailboxes. So that part has definitely become a lot easier to manage. So how do we actually migrate them? A lot of you probably have quite an amount of content in public folders nowadays. I've definitely seen organizations with a huge amount of public folder databases and without the resources to actually really clean them up or identify who owns which data. So mostly you just need to migrate the data that's already there up to the new platform. We can handle that. But remember, we cannot have any coexistence between new modern public folders that we create and the old legacy public folders. So we are working with a migration scenario when we start to introduce modern public folders. Since this is a cutover process, it's important to note that move all your users and user mailboxes to Exchange 2013 first, or Exchange Online for that case. And then you can start looking to your public folders and handle that as a separate project. You need to make sure that your Exchange platform is fully up to date with the latest patches or rollouts from Microsoft. I've illustrated the latest numbers here, but even if you're moving to online, they keep increasing that to make sure that you're on the latest patch level, because the whole time they are enhancing features. I believe with CU 6 and 7 there were a few changes to the way we handle public folders. So just make sure you update the complete Exchange environment before you start doing any migration on the public folder side. Also, go back and look into your legacy public folders. In case you have multiple public folder databases, maybe even distributed to several sites around the world, make sure you have a healthy public folder replication, so you don't run into any issues with inconsistent data and stuff like that. When we start the migration process, as mentioned, it's a cutover process, and that means at a certain point in time, we'll need to do a lockdown on the legacy public folders, and they will be unavailable for our users. And depending on the data it needs to crawl through, it can take some time for that lockdown of the public folders. When you have migrated or done a test migration and things might not look as it should, or you seem to be missing any data, a rollback is possible. I'll get more into that later. So when we start the migration process, we have a lot of, in this case scenario, some public folder databases, legacy public folder databases. And in between, the engine that helps the migration process, it's the mailbox replication service. It's the same engine that we use when we move mailboxes between databases, or from Exchange 2010 to Exchange 2013 for that matter. So we need to verify our public folders, our legacy public folders. There are some scripts available from Microsoft to do that. The first script we have is that we need to go in and look at our public folder databases. So get an overview of your existing data. Use the public folder statistics scripts, and when that's run and you have an overview of that, save the information you get either to a CSV or an XML file. I'll show you some of it in the demo later. But you can use that extraction of data to verify your migration later on. Then there are some scripts called public folder to mailbox map generator. That takes some of the exports we've done with the previous scripts and sort of maps it from a public folder to a public folder mailbox. And the output of that is a CSV file, which we can go in and edit in Excel in case we just want, might have an amount of data which is more than enough for one public folder mailbox. So from the beginning, we can actually split it up into several public folder mailboxes if we need to. But you can handle all that in the CSV file afterwards. That's why the planning of this is really important when you do all the export from the legacy part. And also, when you start working on your existing, if possible, have your users or who might be responsible for clean up as much as you can in the legacy public folders. Because if you can clean out maybe half of it, there's no need of taking that with you in the migration part. Next step is creating our new public folder mailbox. It's as stated before, but now we put an extra parameter on there to tell the system that that public folder mailbox is hold for migration. This means we as an admin can see it, and we can access it with the PowerShell tools, but no users are able to access this new modern public folders we have in Exchange 2013. Or if we use the commands in Exchange Online, it's the same commands you use. That way, we hold this public folder mailbox, and it's ready to get some content with our migration scripts. Next up, we start the migration request. It's the same way as you do a move mailbox request within Exchange, actually. Now you just tell the Exchange that you have a migration batch of public folders that you need to get moved from a legacy system to Exchange 2013 or the Exchange Online. And you specify the source of all this. In this example, we specify the public folder database in our on-prem environment because this is an on-prem migration, which we illustrate here. I'll get to how it works in online later. And you specify the map file that we created early on. And then we can start copying the hierarchy and the content. What happens is that almost before it's done copying, the Exchange server or the migration process stops and put the database in auto-suspend mode. Now it's ready to do the finalization of the migration, which means that we just need to do the latest delta, and in that period of time, the previous legacy system will be locked down. So we go back to our Exchange 2010, in this case, and we do a lockdown on our public folders. This means that people trying to access our public folders will get a message in Outlook telling them that public folders is unavailable. And now we can start off the migration request again, or resume it, and we will finalize the copy of the hierarchy and the content copying. When all that is done, we can set the parameters that it's not excluded from the hierarchy known by Exchange 2013 anymore. So basically we can make sure that our users can access it. And we can remove or set the parameters that our migration is actually completed. And then after that we can, of course, we need to verify that everything is okay. A few steps in between here, you can actually go in and set a certain user in Exchange 2013 or Exchange Online and give them access to your public folder data, because then they can go in and verify the content is okay before you run the set organization config with the migration is completed through. When you do that, everyone in the organization has access to the new public folder. So what's different in online? Well, when we want to move our public folder content to an Exchange Online, we need to make sure if we have any mail-enabled public folders, which is often seen in organizations. Then we need to make sure that we can route mail based on the email addresses known in public folders. And there are some additional scripts available from Microsoft which you can download for that, because then you need to tell your DSync, which is the one handling all the mail objects, or mail-enabled objects going to Exchange Online, that you also have some mail attributes on some public folders that needs to be known in Exchange Online. So you actually have a way of routing your mail from the on-prem to Exchange Online. And then you need to add additional parameters here. It's the same migration request you do on-prem as you do online, but with a few additional parameters for the online part. Because here you need to tell Exchange Online where to get your public folder content from. So basically you give the request information about what your Outlook Anywhere URL is, and information to an account on-prem which has full access to your public folder data. I'll show you how that works later. So let's see how all that actually works. Just change screen. Can I change this to my primary screen? Might take a short while to update up here. I now have an environment here with Exchange 2010 running, where I have created a few public folders. I have one public folder database with just a little content in there. You need the desktop? Okay. That's the one disabled.
You want to just duplicate?
Yeah, duplicate. Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Okay, as mentioned, this is an Exchange 2010. I just have a few folders in here. Just make sure the screen updates correctly. So what we need to do is this is just to show you I have a few folders. I've copied just a few amount of data in here just to make sure that the migration process doesn't take the whole afternoon. Because when we start the migration, it takes some time, because it's the online mechanisms of Exchange Online that actually drives this process when we get started. Let's see. I have a few scripts here, and I'll explain you how things works. So the first thing we do is the one I just did. Get an overview of the public folders we have in our environment. So the first one, we can see what we have, but we need to put that into context so we can pull it out and we have some documentation of how it actually looks. So I'm exporting this to an XML file, so we can use that for verification later on. It would also be interesting to see exactly what's the amount of data or items we have distributed in our public folders. if we run the public folder statistics command, we can see how many items is located within each folder. And I'll do the same with this one. I'll export this to an XML file. Can you see what's on the screen, all of you? Okay. Next step would be exporting the permissions, because of course we can have changed the permissions on some of our public folders. We'll just start off with showing on the screen how it actually looks, and then we'll do the export later or afterwards. So it shows me all the specific client permissions that I have on each individual public folder I have. I'll also do a similar export of that. So now I have documented my public folder environment. I have the structure, I have the statistics, and I have the permissions in here. So basically I have what I need to have the complete overview of my public folder environment, as long as the public folder database I have is on this server. I could have scenarios where I have replicated different content to different sites. In that case, you need to run this on the other servers as well, or you need to make sure you replicate all your public folder content to your main site and then run these tools. In case you have folders which include a backlash in the name, you need to rename those because they'll not get migrated in the process. So to identify if we actually have any of those in the environment, I ran this command and it gives me nothing back, because in this case I do not have any which has the backslash used in the name of the public folder, because that is not allowed during the migration process. If you have, this can identify it for you, and you can start a process where you might need to rename some of your folders. So next step will be that we need to identify if we have had any public folder migrations running previously. And we cannot have any of these settings set to true, because then we are in the middle of a stage where we are actually doing a migration. And now we are just starting a migration up. If that's the case, you need to reset these so all the settings are set to false if this is the new migration you want to do. This could have happened if you did a rollback. You could have had some of these settings still in there. So in case we need to handle mail-enabled public folders and move them to Exchange Online, then we need to add a new accepted domain in our Exchange organization. We call it something with the public folder destination, but the domain name would be the tenant of my Exchange Online. In this case, it's fabricamdk.onmicrosoft.com. So in my migration scenario, I want to move all my public folders to Exchange Online. I set this accepted domain type to an internal relay. So Exchange will know how to relay this further to Exchange Online. So I run this here, and we've added the accepted domain. Next step would be to start the preparation for our migration. It's quite similar step as to when we did the overview of our public folders. We run the export, or instead we run the export of the public folder statistics, and we export the information to a CSV file, and we also state our local Exchange 2010 server in the parameters. So now, based on this, we get a CSV file. Let's check the input of that. And basically it's just a file that shows you the amount of the content located in each of your public folders in my small public folder hierarchy here. So I'll just clear the screen so it might be easier to see. And next step. Now we need to create a map which we can use for the migration. So we use the public folder mailbox map generator tool. The scripts needed for this is also available for download from Microsoft. I have the links in the end of my presentation. We put in the parameter here stating the amount of content that we want to put in to our destined public folder mailbox. In this case, it's 15 gigabyte. And we wanted to create a new CSV file based on the input we had earlier, the size file, and the output of this will be a public folder to mailbox CSV file. So let's run this and afterwards have a look at how it then maps up the content we have. Well, in this case it's quite simple because I only have one top hierarchy and a few subfolders. But it's in this case where you could map up in case you had different public folder data or different hierarchies. You can map up the destination of this. It could be that you wanted some of the content to be moved to a public folder mailbox called 2 and some of it to 1. And this is where you do the mapping process in the planning part. And that's purely dependent on the amount of data you have. In my case, we can live with one public folder mailbox. And I renamed it to PF mailbox just to make it easier to identify when we get to Exchange Online. This would be in case we had any mail-enabled public folders. Then there is a different script available also for Microsoft, where we sort of export the list of what will our mail-enabled attributes be. I'll skip that in this step, since I don't have any mail-enabled folders. And we'll go to the next. Now we are basically ready to connect to Exchange Online. In this case, I'll create another PowerShell command line here. So this is the same way as described a number of places on the internet and in TechNet articles. There are a few parameters in which you can connect to Office 365 and Exchange Online. And this is the same process I'm using here. First, I want to enter the credentials for my online tenant. Next step would be prepping the session using the credentials I've entered before. And now we are importing that session. So it made a remote session into Exchange Online, and that session has been initiated, and now we can import the PowerShell session to my command line here, and thereby importing the commandlets available from Exchange Online. would be more or less the same process as if you did a remote PowerShell against your on-prem Exchange environment, Exchange 2013 that is. So now we have information available in of our Exchange Online. We can see which mailboxes is available in our Exchange Online. Currently I just have the admin one. I'll clear the screen so we are ready for the next part here. Then we are ready to, we need to check if there are any public folder migration requests already running in Exchange Online. Let's see. This is from my test earlier. I actually thought that one was already cleaned out. So I just removed that. So again, when I run to see if we have any migration requests already running up there, we have none. And that's just to make sure we don't have any confusion with previous run migrations of public folders. That's from my testing early on. So sorry about that. So next step would be check if we actually have any public folders up there. We do not. And in case we had public folders up there, or public folder mailbox, it would probably be interesting to know what that public folder were or how many it was, and we can run the get public folder command. In this case, we don't have any public folder mailboxes up there, so of course we get an error. But just in case you had moved some content and you have public folder mailboxes up there, use this command or get the public folder to get an overview of what actually might have been moved up there. So next step would be to prep our Exchange Online with a public folder mailbox. So we are ready to move our legacy public folder data. We are creating a new public folder mailbox up there, and we hold it for migration. So it's not known or seen by any users, but it's ready to migrate data. It's automatically set by the default quota in Exchange Online, which is 50 gigabyte. And that's also the limit for which it will begin auto-splitting into multiple public folder mailboxes. So next step here would be that we need some of the additional information about our on-prem environment when we start to do the migration request from our online. It's from my previous slide stating all the changes or differences when we start to do public folders in Exchange Online. So what we need to do first is get our legacy DN for the admin that we want to use to handle our public folder migration. I need to run that from my on-prem Exchange 2010 commandlet. I'm just running two different. You could actually run everything within one commandlet, but just so you can see when we are accessing the online and when we are actually doing something in the on-prem environment. Also from the on-prem environment, I need to get my legacy DN for my Exchange server. That's that one. And we need to get our URL for the Outlook Anywhere environment. You probably already know that, but just in case, pull it from the system to make sure you have the correct URL needed for this. So this is the information we need to start off the public folder migration initiated from Exchange Online. We have the 2 legacy DNNs, one for the Exchange server, the second one for the admin we want to use, and we have the URL for our Outlook Anywhere. So Outlook Anywhere needs to be set up, and you need to be aware of the authentication you run on the Outlook Anywhere, because that also needs to be stated in the parameters when we start the migration batch. So we go back to our Exchange Online here, and we state all these to set the parameters for our migration. We have the legacy DN for the administrator we need, and we have the legacy DN for our Exchange server. All this is set up as variables so we can use them when we start to kick off the migration script. I know it's a lot of PowerShell, but that's the only way we can move things with migrating public folders. In case we had any mail-enabled public folders, we at this point would import what's known of all the mail attributes from our existing public folders. So the new environment actually knows our mail attributes on public folders. If we don't have any, we can skip that step, and the next step would be I'm just clearing this one so we don't have that much content. So we call a PowerShell script called new public folder migration request. That's a PowerShell script or commandlet that's part of Exchange 2010 or 2013 or Exchange Online. And then we set the parameters needed by Exchange Online. For on-prem, it's a lot easier because you don't need that many parameters here. You just need to set parameters back to which public folder database your legacy public folders are located on. But for now, we need to state we have the Outlook Anywhere name. And next we go and fetch our CSV file we created earlier. And then we have the remote credentials, which I typed in before. And this is the remote credentials used to connect to our on-prem environment using the Outlook Anywhere connection. And then we have the legacy DNs, both for the mailbox we're using and the server which we are connecting to. The server holding our legacy public folder mailboxes. And in this case, I need to change my authentication from NTLM to basic authentication. This is what I'm running on Outlook Anywhere. And we kick this off. Now, this is the same way as when you move mailboxes, for those of you familiar with that on Exchange 2013. The way Exchange handled that, both the new on-prem or online, is everything is handled queue-based by the mailbox replication service. So this job is just put in a queue now, ready for migration, and the server starts working on it when it has time. Unfortunately, it can take a bit of time to complete this, even though I have a very little amount of data in here. There is a process for when the jobs runs in Exchange Online, which I cannot control, so it can take a time. Last time I ran this job, I have a few megabytes of data, that's all. And I think the job took 15 minutes to just start, and then a few minutes to do the replication. So you kind of get the picture that this, with gigabytes and terabytes of public folder data, this can take a long time, especially if you want to move things to Exchange Online. Let's see what the status is on this. we have commands where we can monitor this process and see what the state is. Right now, if we want to get a detailed view of this, I'm running the same command, get public folder migration request, and then I want to include the report of the job actually running. And then we get a lot more information in here. We can see the amount of data which it's transferring per minute. And we can see for how long the job has been running. So far it doesn't seem that this might run pretty quickly today. We only transferred 100 items, so it could take a bit more time. Let's keep it here, and I'll continue with the slides, and we can see in the end if it's already finished. But when this is done, there is a few more commandlets that needs to be run. And I think I described some of them in the slides, where you do the lockdown and the final resume of the public folder migration request before the users can actually access them. The scripts and the parameters and everything that I've been using here, I can make that available in the slide deck. I'll also make it available on my blog. Let's go back to just need to skip a few slides. Let's see. So now we are back at. Okay, that was the demo. A few best practices about the migration part. Well, you need to analyze your existing environment before you start this, because there could potentially be quite a planning process in making sure you can move or migrate all your data. As I stated earlier, export all the information you can get out of Exchange, evaluate all this in CSV files, and use Excel to get an overview. So also identify public folders which might even not be used, or have users clean up as much public folder data as possible. So you kind of reduce the amount of data you need to migrate in the end. Potentially, there could also be a lot of data located in public folders, which you could move to different functions. Some could be moved to maybe SharePoint, others could be used to a shared mailbox or something like that. And there is a certain limit on how many users can actually access one public folder mailbox, and that limit is 2,000 mailbox users at once. In case you have more users accessing public folder content, you need to split your public folders into multiple public folder mailboxes. And of course, you can use the database availability group. So if you want to have any high availability on your public folder structure, move the public folder mailboxes into the DAG. I mentioned some of this. You can use that as reference. So, alternatives to public folders. Do you really need to use public folders? Because with Exchange Online and Exchange 2013, Microsoft also introduced other mechanisms. One of them is site mailboxes. How many of you know site mailboxes today? Just a few. Briefly about site mailboxes. It's a mailbox which you create in Exchange, but that mailbox is able to hold more content than just mail. It's actually able to hold or sort of centralize content such as documents as well. It's very beneficial for people working in a team. So it's sort of a shared mailbox without just mail. You have mail, calendar, and you have a lot of documentation or documents. And the document part of this site mailbox is actually handled by SharePoint in the back end. So it's sort of a hybrid of some SharePoint and Exchange, but the benefit of this is it's located within the end user's Outlook client. And they see it and access it like a normal mailbox, a shared mailbox or a mailbox like their own. Besides that, we have the public folders as we know them. It can still be beneficial for a number of things that we need to share with multiple users. And then we have the shared mailboxes. And some content from public folders might be able to be moved to shared mailboxes instead of having them in public folders. So that was just to highlight a few alternatives that we have to public folders. So to summarize on all this, planning is definitely important. Get the best overview you can of your existing public folders, and you will also need that later on in the verification process. Also see if you can clean up as much data as possible in your public folders before you start the whole migration process. Make sure all your users are migrated to either Exchange 2013 or Exchange Online before you start this process, because users in Exchange 27 or 2010 cannot access modern public folders. And then again, get familiar with PowerShell if you're not really already familiar with it, because public folders is a lot of PowerShell. Get the overview, start working with the scripts. You can do a lot of the work I've already done here, but as long as you don't do the log migration and the completion of the migration process, you can always roll back and get familiar with how the process actually is. But then start creating the new mailbox, get it ready to migration. And when you started migrating, this is when you can start removing all your old legacy public folder databases. If this process with all the PowerShell scripting and all that scares you a bit, there are third-party tools out there, especially if you're moving into the cloud with Exchange Online. There are cloud migration providers like MigrationWiz, Skykick, and I know there are a few others out there, which can actually handle the whole process of moving your data from on-prem to Exchange Online. Then you don't have to sit here, validate, and working with all the PowerShells yourself. I have few references. A lot of it is for TechNet article about the migration and where you'll find the migration scripts. My information, if you want to connect with me, I'll write a blog post later where I'll describe a lot of the migration process and the scripts used in my session today. The scripts needed for the migration process with the links are all in the slides. And last, questions. I hope you have any questions. If you have any questions, I have a few giveaways. I have a few fellow Exchange MVPs have sponsored a few ebooks. So there were a few questions.
You said you should clean up. If you've got an archiving solution, would you do archiving before you migrate? Or will you do migrate and archive afterwards?
It probably depends on, the question goes, if you have an archiving solution in place, would you archive before you migrate or archive after the migration, right? It probably depends on the archiving solutions. I think most archiving solutions leave back a sort of a stop file. And if they do that, it doesn't really matter at what point you do the archive. And it would probably be best to do it before you do the migration, because then you have less data to actually migrate. There was another question over here.
Can you use this long PowerShell where you specify the Outlook Anywhere server to cross-forest migration from on-premise to on-premise, or do you have to use third party for that?
The question goes if the migration request script which we used, where we identified the Outlook Anywhere parameters, if we can use that in cross-forest. I'm Haven't tried that, but I'm pretty sure since it's the same command list we use, I'm pretty sure you can use that cross-premise as well, more or less the same way. So I hope that answers.
Do you have any reference time on what it would take, say, to 10 gigabytes or 100 gigabytes, what it takes to, how long it takes to migrate on-premise?
The question goes on-premise, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
it depends on the hardware, but the hardware is pretty new, so yeah.
Yeah. The question goes how long, if we have any reference on how long it takes to migrate data on-prem from 2010 or 2007 to 2013. Of course, it depends, as you mentioned, on the hardware, on the networking in general, but it still takes a long time. But of course, it can do the Delta migration to begin with, but the last bit can still take a long time because it still has to crawl to all your data to make sure it gets everything. From what I've seen is, I think it was around, let's say, 150, 200 gigabyte. I think that part for copying everything took about 18 to 20 hours.
Yeah, the reason for asking is that it's very, very small bits that is actually being moved at the time.
It is. So it will take a long time. Any more questions? Otherwise, that's all I had. Remember to evaluate when you leave the room, and otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the session and got some information that you can use.